And that's the view from the other side. So that's looking from the bottom up with the pelvic floor. And again, you can see the spine on top, vagina at the bottom. There's a lot of muscles involved in that pelvic floor. So if we're looking at dysfunction, it can happen through childbirth, pelvic trauma, age, obesity, pelvic surgery, lots of different ways that you can essentially create a dysfunctional pelvic floor. It could be that the dysfunction is a secondary issue to weakness or poor coordination in pelvic floor muscle. I find that a lot of my clients do have very poor coordination between the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, but actually even more so they have a hypertonicity in the pelvic floor. In other words, they have this very rigid pelvic floor that is contracted but can't easily release. And I think that some of that has to do with the fact that we have this habit of sucking our bellies in all the time from an aesthetic point of view. So we don't want to look like our guts hanging out at any time, because I think that's what gets this very grippy sort of feeling into the pelvic floor. Try and relax the stomach as much as you can when you need to. Obviously, when you're training, when you're working out, it needs to be engaged because it's going to offer you stability. Over-recruited or hypertonic or overstimulated pelvic floor can lead to urinary tract infections, because actually you can't empty the bladder properly, so you get a buildup of bacteria and then that causes an infection, and that can happen fairly frequently. A frequent urge to urinate, incomplete bowel emptying, leaking of urine, unexplained lower back pain or coccyx pain, pain or spasms in the pelvic region, and discomfort during sex. Constipation is actually a really important one to try and manage, because when you're constipated, you're going to bear down really hard to eliminate the bowels or to evacuate the bowels. And unfortunately, that can create some issues with pelvic floor because it's just that hard press down. And in fact, it would be much better when you are voiding the bowels to have your knees higher than your hips. So I know that most people they don't like the idea of a squatting toilet, you know, just a hole in the ground and you squat over it. But it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's how we should void the bowels, because it gets us into a position where the hips are completely open. We've got natural compression because we're squatting down into it. In fact, these days, I understand that you can get squatting boards that you can actually put over your loo seat, which actually is a brilliant idea. And maybe that's something you can think about. But it definitely makes sense from a point of view of opening everything up to allow yourself to eliminate completely. And the position itself can help with constipation, never mind other things that we can bring in and employ to help with that too.